This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so it is Thursday, August 7th, 2020, and it's just after 3:00 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is the ArcGIS Pro Workshop. And this month's topic is topology. What is it? How do we set it up in Pro? How do we correct it? What sort of alignment tools and fixes do we have available for us? And as I was mentioning just a couple of minutes ago before we start the recording, we're going to start out very, very fundamental. What is topology? And we'll go from there. So just to remind everybody, in order to communicate with us, we're gonna turn off everybody's mics, except for Chris, and we have a chat window available to us. So if you want to ask a question or want me to stop and explain something else, just sort of put something up in the chat. Chris will moderate and he will let me know because I sometimes get lost in what I'm talking about, and we'll go from there. All right, so the question is, what is topology? So topology, as it sort of relates to Esri's implementation of it, is sort of an analysis of, it's a rule-based analysis of how geometries relate to one another. All right, do these things, are they coincident with one another? Are there gaps? Are there spaces? Do they share coordinate values? Those sorts of things. And in order to have topology, all of the layers, all the feature classes that participate in topology must be in a single feature data set. Now, feature data set really is nothing more than a spatial definition that says all of these are this projection and have this precision levels and that sort of thing. And the reason why Esri does that is to just make sure that they're not looking at reprojection issues or anything like that. But to have a topology, you must have a feature data set, and all the feature classes that participate in it must be stored in that one single feature data set. The other rule is that a single feature class can only participate in one topology. It cannot participate in multiple topology objects in here. So as you can see on this sample geodatabase here, I actually have a feature data set called Pro Topo. And in there, I actually have two feature classes, one test lines and one test polygons on there. There's also some other layers in here in this geodatabase, anchor points and sample sections and lines and such. They cannot participate in this topology only because they are not in that same feature class. They might have the same, they might have the same projection and the same spatial reference and precision level, but they have to be in that same feature data set in order to participate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new topology class inside of here. And I'm just going to let it say what it is. It has the XY cluster tolerance that's set according to my settings here. And I'm just going to say, go ahead, that's it. And I'm not going to add any rules right now. I'm just going to say, let's just create this. And I'm going to start looking at the rules that we have available to us here. So it is creating this object.
Frank, Mark
Yes,
has
sir.
a question. He says, can we still use map topology, which allows us to include feature classes from multiple sources?
Yes, you can. So what we're really talking about first is sort of the persistent rule-based topology. Map topology looks at what's actually on the drawing, and you can include things from different projection systems with map topology. And, I'll show you that in a minute here. And we'll go over that. Matter of fact, that's actually a great question, Mark. Thank you. So right now I'm on the Edit tab inside of ArcGIS Pro. And under the Edit tab, there is a Manage Edits grouping. And under there, we pull this down, we can see that there are, in fact, multiple ways of analyzing topology. By default, until I add a rule-based topology in here, you have no topology or map topology. Map topology says go and analyze the elements that are included in my map so that I can work with them. So in that case, I can go and say, let's analyze map topology, and I can go in here. And by the way, this is 2.6 that I'm using. And one of the things that is in 2.6 is this new Start and Enable Editing button. And until I do that, I can't edit. You can turn that off. And I'm so used to just going in and editing all the time. That's exactly what I do. And I'll show you how to do that. If I go in here to my options, go to editing, down here under editing session, it says enable and disable editing from the edit tab. When I uncheck that, that button will no longer be there, and it will act just like it did in 2.5 all the way back. I'm going to keep it here just for a minute. I've already started editing. Now I can go in here, I've got map topology turned on, and I can look at my edits, and as I'm editing, it will allow me to go and do this. And if I were to go and use a tool such as a move tool, when I move something, it moves everything else that is connected to that using map topology. It's easier to see this in, let's do this over here. Let's move. And you'll see it actually moving some of these other points in here. So it actually goes and moved everything associated with that. One of the questions that often pops up is that, well, I don't want to move everything. I just want to move that one point in there. Let me undo this here and I'll do that move. If I go back here to projects, options, under editing, there is under here stretch topology. Proportionally when moving, I usually uncheck that. And that should work fine. So now we go in here and do a move. I should be able to just move and just move that one vertex, not the entire feature on here. Again, that was under options, editing, and under the geometry portion, I will usually uncheck both of these so I don't stretch it proportionally when moving a vertex or when moving a topology edit on there. If you have that checked, it will go and move everything proportionally to how you're moving it. So map topology does an immediate analysis of what you have in your display area. And it's not rule-based, and it is sort of instantaneous. Map topology is nice, but sometimes you want to do rules. For example, I want to analyze whether or not these polygons are overlapping or whether there's gaps between them. So what I'll do is I'll implement a rule-based topology to go and do that. Let's go back here to catalog, go back here, and let's go to properties and actually add some rules here. By the way, my feature classes, I have my polys and my lines already added. Now when I go to rules, I can go and add a new rule here. And that rule, I'm going to include the polys in it and say that my rule is they must not have gaps. It's a good rule. I can also go back here to polys and say another rule is they must not overlap. And I can go ahead. Yeah, I have to stop editing. Thank you so much. So let us stop editing in here. Let's add that again. Feature class poly must not have gaps. And feature class poly
Lines.
polys.
You sure?
Yeah, right now
Okay.
I'm only doing the polys. All right, so now I have that. I still don't have that in my map document until I actually go and add the topology into my map document. All right. Now inside of here, it will show me, for example, my point errors, my line errors, and my polygons errors. I only have polygons in my rules, but it will show me what's called the dirty area. The dirty area is anytime a feature gets edited in the background that you don't see it, the envelope, the boundary of that entire feature that got edited gets marked as dirty, meaning it requires validation before you can do any rule-based topology and clean up on it. So this just shows you the areas that have been edited or not validated since you started editing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start editing here, and I'm going to go to my rule-based on here. So I am now set to go and begin analyzing what I've got here. So I'm going to open up my error inspector. The error inspector in here is a little different from the ArcMap topology error inspector, but it has the same functionality. On here, you have the ability, here's the topology it's going to analyze. Here's the command to go and validate. And right now, because I've got a toggle over here that says only the map extent, I'm going to toggle that off. I'm going to try and toggle that off. I'm going to validate everything inside my current map extent, and it shows me here's the errors. Notice my dirty area went away, shows me here's the errors in here. And it lists, in this case, it lists, that's why I can't tell, oh, there it is now. And it will validate everything in here. It lists every one of these errors. And if you look, as I go in here, it will show me the individual errors, where they are. It highlights them in yellow and such. So there's the preview option on here for each of these. I can actually go in here and do a preview on it on here. There's also, in addition, inside of the ArcGIS Pro, there is a details where I can actually, it tells me, here's the feature that's involved in this, and here's whether or not there's another one, and whether or not it has what the error rule is that's being basically analyzed here, and where it came up with an error on it. So on here, it will show me that in fact the rule was must not have gaps, and here's the actual feature on here that had it. Here's the length of that gap. If I go one more button over, here are the fixes, and these are key. It's like, okay, so here's what you can do to fix this. So if I go here to must not have gaps, I can right click here and say zoom in, and it will zoom in and show me, okay, this must not have gaps. My fix is I can create a feature in there. That's one of the things I can do with this. So it wants to fill it in. That may not be what I want to do. I may want to instead close that gap up using a different tool. But in order to fix it, the first option is, and this is sort of the default option, well, go and create an option here. Same way with must not overlap. If I go in here, there's 3 different options here. There is create a feature, merge the features together, or remove the overlap on here. Again, I use this mostly, I use topology to figure out where they are, and I'll usually go in and fix it myself only because I want to know where it is. On all errors, you have the option to say, this is not an error. This is in fact an exception. This one is allowable. And we'll see that here on, I think this is it here. Nope, this is it here. This one. If I zoom out to this one, this is the overall perimeter. Let's turn the lights off here. This is the overall perimeter. Must not have gaps means you've got to have something next to it, and your overall perimeter will always be an error on here. So if you're dealing with parcels and you've got roads where the road doesn't have a polygon in it, that's going to be an error if you have must not have gaps as one of your rules on here. So if it is an exception, meaning this is not a real error, I can go in here and say, well, just mark that one as an exception and don't list that as an error anymore. All right, so I can go in and do that. So let's go through and look at some of the fixes that we have here. This one is must not have gaps. I can go in here and I can zoom into it. So if I look, you can see there actually is a gap here between these two. I'm going to clear this out. It's still showing me that there is an error in there. There's a couple ways of fixing this. You can have it build a polygon in there. What that's doing usually is creating a sliver polygon, something you probably don't want to build. Or you can tell it how to close that gap up. And by default, if we go in here and look at some of the tools that are available inside of Pro, we have things such as we can have an align edge tool. We have an align features tool. Previously, we might have to go through an ArcMap and do something like create using autocomplete to go and draw something in there and have it create 2 polygons that filled that space in. What we're going to do here is we're going to use a couple of these tools and show you how to use them. So this first one I'm going to use is called the Align Edge tool. Now the Align Edge tool, if I move it on, a couple things to remember. One, you have to have some sort of topology for this to work. It has to analyze it, but it doesn't have to be rule-based topology. It can be a map topology for this to work. And what this is going to do is it's going to take, and you'll note there's, if I go over one edge, one of the edges is a solid yellow, the other edge is a dashed yellow. When I click on that solid yellow edge, it will move that edge over to where the dashed edge is. So if I go in here and I can say take this edge and move it over, all right, it will go in there and fill that gap in. And if I go and validate this, I will find that that has actually gone away as an error. It's no longer there. But notice it automatically marked that area as dirty. It had an error, associated with it, so it's going to mark it as dirty. So let's see if I can find another error in here. So that's a line edge. Very powerful tool, very nice tool. Be careful with it because it's very easy to go and collapse polygons completely with it if you're clicking on the wrong edge, and it'll make that polygon disappear. If you do not have symbology shown correctly, you will not know that that polygon disappeared. From experience, I've worked on data sets where I've been using Align Edge to help clean up and make sure things are coincident. And I've actually made lots and parcels just completely disappear. Just they're not even there anymore. All right. So let's look here now. Here's another one here. Here's another gap in here. And again, I could do the same thing wherever with a line edge, wherever I go and anytime that solid line is going to go to the dashed line. So in this case here, this solid line, if I click it and use this, it's actually going to create a little sliver going down here, just sort of to show you when I do this, it will go and create that sliver all the way down to there so that now this polygon goes over there. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. By the way, I'm going to turn off dirty error right now. So in this case, I would want to be careful and say, well, let's use this other one instead. And click on that solid line there, let it go and join over to these other areas. Then have it go and validate topology and see that in fact that's not an error anymore. I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to undo the move, because instead of using a line edge, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an align feature instead. An align feature, all right, is that, as you can tell if you've been watching our workshops, this is one of our favorite tools. Align feature allows us to go and draw where this line should be. And it will go out and analyze a buffer area for any vertices, anything that intersects that buffer area, and move them so they all match that line that you're drawing. So I can actually go in here and draw a line and say from here to here, you know, make everything straight inside of there. And then all I have to do is I have to make sure that this buffer area goes and covers that over. All right, so this is going to analyze everything within 100 foot of that line that I drew, and all of those vertices are going to be moved over. And when I click OK, it will go and analyze those. Those red lines that you see, those are still from the topology errors, and I can go and analyze that. And it has now gone and zipped them all up. It's actually corrected any error that I might have in there with that. So again, two different ways to do this. The third way, with the old way, was you create sliver polygons and then you merge them together, and that is often both problematic and extremely inefficient in what you're doing there. All right. Do we have any questions yet, Christopher?
None yet.
Okay.
I did have a question actually, just with regards to that last tool that you used.
Okay.
Because I noticed that once you applied it, that the polygon, the blue polygon on the bottom left, its angle adjusted slightly to the left. Maybe that was just the way that it appeared on my end, but I'm wondering if there's a way to set the tool so that, yeah, so I guess it does look like it did change the angle slightly.
Yeah.
Is there a way to change it so that when it aligns, the angle stays consistent?
That's a great question.
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, I do not know of anything yet. Well, as far as a process to do that, no, but there is a technique that you can use on this. So for example, if I know that I want to keep this point here and I want this to go up and be here and then go over to here, I can go in here and I can, instead of drawing a line from here to here, I can go up here and say parallel,
right,
to where it intersects with that line, and then come over here and say go ahead and align it to that. But the other option is to go in here. So there is no way to go and constrain this north-south line so that it stays along that same bearing. You could also go and put a point here and a point there, and it will go and constrain it to that point, that vertex that you clicked on. But that doesn't guarantee that it's going to be an actual extension of that line. So again, it may be that you wind up doing this in 2 steps where, let's turn that back off again. Let me, oh, you know what I just realized? So here's a dirty little secret about 2.5, or excuse me, 2.6. 2.6. Can you figure out what just happened, Christopher?
No, I was gonna. Victoria has a question, but continue,
Okay.
and then I'll address the question.
All right. So with 2.6, they have a new function in here where they're attempting to go and auto-save your project file. All right. Auto-saves the project file so that just in case ArcGIS Pro crashes, your project and your setup won't get lost. All right. And that autosave, by the way, occurs every 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes. Well, by default, I have a set here that says every time I save a project, save my edits. All right. So when it just saved that project, it saved the edits that I had put in there already. Just be aware of that. Just be aware of that. It took us a while before we realized what was going on. The recommendation always was, well, just when you save your project, save your edits. But now that there's an auto save on the projects, you want to be aware of that. I'm going to uncheck this because I don't necessarily want my edits to be saved. Unfortunately, that's what it did here. I don't necessarily want those to be saved. Let's go and load this again back in here. All right. And let's validate this. So that's not an error anymore. So getting back to your question, Paulette, there is no way that we can actually guarantee that it's at that unless you do it in the 2 steps. The first one is going and making the alignment where you're going parallel up here until the intersection. And then once you're done, then you can go and make any other changes along this east-south line, east-west line. But even then, you want to be careful to make sure that it's where you want it to be. All right. Just be careful because the alignment tools basically align to whatever edges it finds, but it doesn't necessarily go and look at sort of the direction of those lines. It attempts to go and do things that are perpendicular or the shortest distance over to those lines. All right. Tori, you had a question.
Yes. Tori wants to know how the Align Features tool affects the COGO.
Good question.
And
Good question.
then after that, Mark has a question as well.
All right. So in here, I've got these lines over here, just sort of to show you these are COGO lines. And I'm going to make them both 200 feet long. All right. And just to show that, I'm going to go in here and turn on for these lines. I'm just going to say, just go ahead and label here. Let's make sure that we're labeling these all the time. And we should see here, we probably still have, I'll make make this one 300 just to show it. These are nowhere near reflective of what they are. By the way, it's showing pink because these are COGO lines and it wants to have not just the distance, it also wants to have the bearing on there. It's giving you a warning that it's not full COGO, it's just portion. So the question was, well, how does that impact the COGO element on here, I'm back on align features. I still have this really, really broad. So let me go and draw a line here and say I want to take these lines and move them to here. What happened? The COGO attributes are not changed in any way. They remained exactly the same. It goes and attempts to go and conform those new features so that they comply with whatever line you just drew, whatever path you drew in the aligned features, but it does not in any way affect those COGO lines. I can still go in here and say, using a tool, I can go in here and do an update COGO and do that and have it automatically calculate what they should be, but it doesn't by itself go and automatically do that for you. All right. Okay, Mark, you had a question.
Yeah, so in regards to the new autosave feature in 2.6, Mark wants to know, can we save edits to an intermediate layer similar to how MS Word will give you an option to recover a file after a crash?
No, nope, I don't. I'm not aware of any way where you can do that. No. I wish. That's a good suggestion. You might think about putting that up on the ideas, but I can't envision Esri doing that now. Yeah, especially with
but yeah.
Yeah, I can't. It's considering how many different types of data sources and feature services that you might be editing against. Everything from a shapefile to a file, a feature class in a geodatabase, to a version, the SDE versioning, to a feature service, to on premises, to a feature service hosted on ArcGIS Online, to a hosted feature service that's branch versioned. I can't envision they would do that. It would be nice, but I don't think so. Nice idea. Nice idea. All right, going back to topology. All right, going back to topology. We still have another error in here. We actually have two errors in here. If I look, one is must not have gaps. Must not have gaps. And in fact, that's this entire one. Now, why is it showing it to me? Because I'm telling it to show all the errors on here. I can tell it to exclude my exception. So if I've marked something as exception, I can tell it don't show the ones that I've already looked at and said these aren't exceptions. So I can do that through this additional filter here and say, well, show me all the rules, or just show me certain rules, or show me exceptions or don't show me exceptions. So there it is here. Here's my other one, which is that must not overlap. And if I look at the standard fixes, I can create a feature for that. So basically it looks at that overlap area, creates a polygon for that, and deletes it out of the other two. It merges it, in which it asks you which one do you want to merge into, or it just removes it, cuts it out, and leaves a gap there. I've always thought the first one and the third option, those are sort of, why would anybody do that? Why would you create a gap between your polygons? It's almost always that you want to go and merge this. If I click on the merge options on here, all right, I'm still not crazy about how it zooms out, but it will show you and say, okay, this polygon is the larger polygon. And it always gives you by default that larger polygon as the option that you want to go in and correct this into, so that the merge area or the overlap area gets moved into that. Or you can do the smaller one, and this is smaller one from an area standpoint, and does it on there. You can use this, and this is a good fix. However, sometimes you just want to split the difference. All right, so if you want to split the difference, what tool would you use? Right now, I would use Align Feature. Get in here, Align Feature. To do it, go in here and tell it, I'm holding down the space bar so that it goes and does that. And I would tell it to go ahead and align them. And then once that's done, I would tell it to go ahead and validate this and validate it, and that error would be gone. All right. Simple errors, gaps and overlaps. These are the standard things that you see inside Polygon feature classes all the time. Are there any questions with this?
Paulette wants to know, why does it zoom out?
It zooms out and attempts to show you the extent of those polygons in which it's going to merge them into when you
Yeah,
do
it
the merge.
drives me crazy.
I agree. I agree.
I hate it.
I agree. I agree. I agree. You know, this is
I work with huge polygons.
yeah. The I work everywhere from very, very tiny sliver polygons to big county boundaries, and it drives me crazy all the time also. It just, I wish there was an option to turn that off. I haven't seen that yet. By default, anytime you decide to go and do a merge, it goes and does that. You know, the best I could say is let's go and start bombarding Esri and the ideas to give us that option on there. Okay, so now that we have that in place, let's go back to edits. Let's save this. Let's stop editing and let's go back to catalog and let's look at the lines. Let's go and do some properties and let's add some more rules in here. Let's add a line rule. All right, and say that the lines must be covered by the boundary of a polygon. And let's add one more in here that says that the boundary of this polygon must be covered by no, wrong one. Must be covered by a line. Topology rules invalid or malformed. Which one? I'm going to remove this. Must be covered by a boundary and the boundary must be covered by a line. Which one of those was bad? By the way, I have to share with you. I have been told that this is the part that everybody likes. The fact that I'm making mistakes in front of them. I must be picking up the wrong rule here. Let's try it this way. Polygons have to have lines on them. Let's do this one at a time. The boundary must be covered by the line. right. That should be it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to have to do it outside of this map document.
And you need to state which line class, feature class you want.
I only have one line feature class in there. So by the way, this is a little trick that I've picked up on. I actually have a catalog setting, which has nothing more than a folder connection. I'm going to go and add another folder connection for this. And then I can get in here and do all sorts of things with this. Here's my Pro Topo. Let me go in here and now add a new rule here and say that the polygons must be covered by boundaries. By lines. That's very interesting. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to waste time doing this. A new topology. All right, there. Keep lines and polygons in here. Finish this. I usually, when I'm doing this, I establish all the topology rules at the very beginning. Polys must not have gaps. Polys must not overlap. Polys must have lines on them. Lines must be covered by the boundary of the polys. That's really lines must be a single part. Is it having a problem with this line feature class? No, the line feature class
just
is
worked.
good. All right. Lines must be covered by boundary of, let's try this. No, it's not liking this. So I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to try something else. right, I go to editing, start editing. That's on here. Make sure that I add my topology to my current map. All right, and I can say validate everything. And this is my exception. I don't want to see my exception, so that's not in there anymore.
Mark asks, is must be covered by boundary of line area correct? Shouldn't it be polygon boundary?
Let's see if I can do this. Must be covered by the boundary of the polygons. Oh. Maybe I need to, oh geez. Sorry guys. Stop editing. I'm sorry about that. Lines must be covered by the boundary of, I need to go and put in the second feature class in here. All right.
Tori said that a couple minutes ago.
So why didn't you tell me?
I
Sit
did.
here.
I did.
She tried to.
Oh, I'm sorry. So can I blame it on Christopher then?
Sure.
The boundary must be covered by the lines, and I need to put in the lines. All right. Now, let me start editing. Let me go in here and validate this. And in fact, it shows me all the errors that are in here. All right. What is this one here? Must not have gaps. That actually is the exception I don't want to see on there. This one, the test lines. All right. This says create feature. So on every one of my polygons, it has an error on it because none of them had lines on top of it. So the reason I did this is I want to go and show you that I can fix these one by one by one, or I have an option. I can go in here and I can click here. I can hold down my shift key and I can click here. And then it will show me over under the fix pane. Oh, I've got 5 of these. Or if I do this fix, it goes and creates them. And I've got 4 errors where when I click on that, it will remove those errors on them. So let's go ahead and tell it to go ahead and remove those 4 lines that were not valid. And let's go over here and say, go ahead and let's let it finish and say, okay, go ahead and create the lines for those others. All right. So one of the nice things about this topology is that it allows you to go in there, and if you go and select multiple things, it shows you the fixes for them. Now remember, the fixes for the polygons, gaps, and overlaps, we really decided to not use any of the standard fixes. So my point is just be careful with this, that yes, there are times when you go in here and just say, hey, do this to every one of them, but you want to be aware that some of the topology errors, you should use the standards, and others you should not use the standards. All right, so in here now, I'm going to try to minimize this again. So in here now, we have a series of lines on top of every single one of these polygon boundaries in here. Now, if we look at the lines, it turns out that I actually am symbolizing them so that I have vertices that are being displayed. The red vertex is the end of the line, the extremity of the line. The green vertex are, in fact, interim vertices that have been created. So if I go in here and do a select on a line, for example, that line, let me get rid of that, let me get rid of that. Let me go here, here's one of my lines. And if I look, it goes all the way around. Here's my other one of the lines. So that each of the polygons, when it created these lines, it created polylines. Lines that are not 2-point lines that go from one to the other. These are now one single line all the way around. All right. Can we see that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all that and get rid of this topology and only select these lines in here. All right. And when I do that, I'm going to go and use a new tool that's in 2.6, which is split into Kogo lines. And I'm going to take all of those, put them on a template, and I can then tell it to go and create a Kogo line out of all of this. And whether or not I want to overwrite the existing Kogo attributes or I want to leave the existing Kogo attributes for the ones that are there already, I'm going to leave them and say, go ahead and split this. This will split these lines into individual discrete Kogo lines. All right. And when I zoom in here, you'll be able to see here the Kogo lines themselves that were split, but these two lines here, these do not have bearings on them. It did split this line here, that line that had a bend in it. It split it at that vertex and it created the distance for them, but it did not create the bearings on them, just sort of to reinforce that. So we have 3 lines in here. These 3 lines here, they do not have bearings. All the other lines have bearings and distances on them. Split into Kogo is a really, really nice tool. Notice also, by the way, all of the markers on those lines, the symbology on those lines, those are all red now instead of green. Red meaning that the lines themselves end at those corners. They are discrete lines for each of those. All right. So I've gone over some really simple elements in here for setting up a topology. I've even failed at it because I failed to create those rules correctly. And so let's open it up a little bit. What questions do we have on here? How much further do we want to go with this on here? Does anybody have any questions?
I'll bite.
Okay.
How far would you recommend we go? This might be my question. I mean, we have, for those of us who have been here for quite a while, this seems awful familiar from when we converted to the parcel fabric in the beginning.
Yes.
Would you go further than that? Than those, what was it, 8 rules that we had to have to convert into the parcel fabric? Or would you not go that far? What would you suggest? I mean, what do you think's best?
So here, I mean, that's an interesting question, especially with the parcel fabric, because it is a unique topologic issue in that right now the default topology rules that come with the standard ArcGIS parcel fabric are like this. They are structural rules. And they define this as saying every polygon, and I'll do it here, every polygon has to have lines on it. All right, so literally it has the same sort of topology rule that we had. It's got some other rules: must not self-intersect, must not self-overlap, must not touch interior, but the polygon boundaries have to have a line on them, so that when you go and have this, it goes and creates this rule and says, no, you've got to go and create, let's go in here, create those individual boundaries, right? They've got to have lines on them. So the first rules that the parcel fabric has is that you've got to have lines that coincide with the boundary of your polygon. Again, it's a series of topology rules on there. And then the second set of rules, because inside the parcel fabric, you also have a point feature class where the points are supposed to be on the ends of the lines. So it then says every line has to have a point on the end of it. But these are structural. It doesn't say that, it doesn't look at the rules of how these features, how these polygons fit with one another. Only looks at them as freestanding polygons and says, okay, can this overlap another polygon? And the reason why it does that is within the data model, it expects that you have overlapping polygons on here. That in fact, you have condominiums. You have condo units stacked on top of one another. Or any time that you have some multiple unit types of interest in property, maybe you've got partial interest. This person owns 25%, this other owns 75% of it. So you can go and model that with two polygons on top of one another. So the parcel fabric does not have any sort of intra parcel type of topology rule against it. It has a very simplistic structural topology rule, and that's it. The problem with topology rules is that it's what we as GIS people that use ESRI technology stack have come to rely upon. But the problem with, and again, ever since ArcNode topology inside of coverages, we've looked at it that way. The problem is it is reactive, meaning you can do anything you want, and then you have to go and have it validate that. All right. So it's always, you can do all the bad stuff. Those of us that were raised, Roman Catholic, you can do all the bad stuff, and as long as you went and you did confession, you got absolved of it. As long as you go and do validate topology, you could clean it up, and you'd be absolved, right? You would be done with it. You could clean it up. And that's not a great workflow. That's not a good way to go and manage parcels efficiently. So I can share with you, and at the virtual UC, we were talking to some of the developers, and Esri is thinking that instead of having more complex topology rules for the parcel fabric, because the topology rules actually define that data model. How do things fit together? Instead of doing that, what they're thinking of doing is having attribute rules go and define things. An attribute rule can be used for a calculation to say, okay, calculate the value in this attribute field. Or an attribute rule can be used as a constraint in which you can set up your rule that says, while you're building a parcel, don't let it overlap another parcel, so that this parcel cannot be inside of another one. And that is not reactive. where you go in and commit the sin and then you get absolved of it, but instead it prevents you from committing that sin. All right. And right now, Esri's thought is that this is a much better way of handling your data model, is by setting up these constraint rules using attribute rules on here, rather than setting up topology rules, which are always reactive instead of proactive. So great question, great question. And the answer is, for those of us that are in parcels, in parcel fabric, that's just something right now that's being really talked about. To let you know, the ArcMap parcel fabric contain those same structural rules, but because of the overall data structure, you had every polygon on top of every other polygon, so that there was no overlap rules, there was no gap rules, there was none of those. It was just every polygon had to have lines and points. That's it. So, yeah. But think about it. Topology may not become quite as important anymore as we move towards new ways of modeling this data, so that it prevents you from making something wrong rather than alerts you afterward.
Yeah, I like that. The other question I have is, I remember when we were in coverages before parcel fabric, we had to constantly be checking our topology and see what was bad to fix it. How often should we check it now in Pro?
Are we talking about Pro Parcel Fabric, or are we talking about just regular Pro?
Well, for me, I just do parcels. So, but
yeah.
you know.
So, how often do you do it? Again, so I'm assuming it's just topology. It's not any sort of attribute rules that are preventing you from doing things. It comes down to how careful or how detail oriented are those people that are mapping it. How often you need to do it, right? Interesting, those people that were in the ArcMap parcel fabric, one of the things I often heard was that, how do I check topology on this? Because my mappers don't pay attention when they're joining. And when you don't pay attention when you're joining inside the ArcMap parcel fabric, you wind up with slivers and overlaps and that everything else. And the recommendation always was, hey, export it out to a polygon feature class and go and apply a gaps and overlaps topology rule and just see what's wrong, and then send that back to your mappers and say, fix these, you got them wrong. That was the only thing you could do, right? Yeah. That was the only thing you could do. But yeah, it's one of those things. We're at that point now where we're trying to figure out what's the best way to do this. We do have new tools. We do have these new options on here besides the old clean and build, which is in coverages, that's what you have to do. You have to clean it, fix it, and then build it on there. Yeah.
Okay, the only other comment I have is how, we were in the parcel fabric. Personally, I was since 2012. So just say 10 years.
Yep.
10 years from now, we'll be doing something completely different. How much customization do I feel comfortable doing that Esri's not going to leave me out in the cold with in 10 years?
Yeah, that's personal. I can say this. We can never tell what's going to happen in the future. We can hope that, in fact, and this is what we do. We pretty much feel that Esri's continuing to try to push and find better ways to do this. All right, using whatever is not the cutting edge, but at least the leading edge in the current computer science technologies. All right, and you saw it. with coverages, it was always, initially it was single file-based coverages. Then it became ArcStorm when we started using database management systems to management. ArcStorm in library, we check things out and then do them and check them back in. And then it became more of relational database management systems in which you'd have these versions, these extra tables that would track your edits, and then you go and reconcile and post them to make sure there wasn't anything else. And now it's feature services with branch versioning. So they're constantly trying to find the best solution to this. And there's no guarantee that 10 years from now, we might have blockchains, you know, going and mapping with all of these edits being tracked by blockchains. You know, it's, who knows? But it is trying to keep up with the latest computer technology and figure out what's the best way to do this. I can applaud them. They do a good job, as frustrating as sometimes we are, because we want to see them solve all those problems faster. We have to recognize that sometimes it just takes some time.
Yeah. I'm not, nothing was meant bad against Ezra there. I just,
No,
I don't want to customize too much anymore because I'm afraid, you know, all those customizations will get lost when the next new version, Pro 2.0, comes out. You know, not actual 2.0, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point. But no, we're already past that 2.5, aren't we?
2.6. What I would suggest is that where we're at now with ArcGIS Pro is much better than where we were with ArcMap.
Yep.
ArcMap was much better than where we were with ArcView. ArcView was much better than where we were with ArcInfo and coverages, right?
Yep.
Much better. So it is progressing.
Yeah, I agree.
It's going to continue to be progressing. What they're providing now, which I find intriguing, is there are so many things that we can customize to make fit the way our organization works. Whereas the problem with the ArcMap parcel fabric was you had to change your organization to fit the way they suggested.
Yep.
Now, and especially for, you know, Victoria, people like you who are in non-PLS states, you'd have the entire cadastral framework and all these other things that you don't have to deal with. You had those. You know, you go to Texas and you had all the lots and blocks in Texas, and, you know, Louisiana and parishes and all these things that were never part of this.
Yep.
Well, now you can customize it. You can set it up exactly the way your organization wants to and needs to work. Yeah.
And the attribute stuff I've been asking for ever since 9.31.
I can tell you that the attribute assistant was a stopgap. It was just sort of a quick way to get some of that functionality in and test it. But attribute rules now, they're amazing what you can do with them. They really are.
All right, I'm sorry, I monopolized the. I'll send it back to you.
You know, as you can tell, I have no problem. I want people to participate. I want them to ask questions. So what, Christopher, what else do we have?
Nothing in the chat as of right now.
All right. You realize if I have nothing in the chat, I'm going to start asking people about things. So Mark Valls, have you done much testing on topology inside of Pro? I know you're still taking that transition slowly, but have you found anything that you're reluctant to or not been able to go and do?
To be honest, I haven't used Pro that much. I've been waiting to update the parcels from ArcMap to ArcPro, and I lost an employee, so I'm managing 3 counties by myself.
Right.
So I just don't have that much time to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can understand that. There is a learning curve associated with it. I know all of us at Panda, we've been going through the same thing where as much as we want to go and learn as much of this as possible, it's overwhelming sometimes. It's one of those things where where do you focus your that extra time that you might have? And I have extra in big quotes, air quotes. It's tough to do. It's tough to do. So I'm curious, is anybody else using Pro with Topology right now, and any experiences you have? Paulette, you mentioned a couple things. Are you using it fairly extensively?
Sorry. Yeah, I use it on my parcels, my zoning, official plans, all those lines.
Yeah. Have you found that, let's rather than me prepping that with a preconceived notion, how have you found it? Is it easier, harder than map?
I think it's about the same. I just don't like the zooming thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when I work with great big polygons.
Yes.
And the slivers like litty teeny, and then the polygon's big.
So that's that brings up a point, something we definitely should talk about is,
But now that you've shown me this other tool, the align features, that might work better.
I can tell you the tools to fix these things are so much nicer now, especially from the fact that with these tools, align features tools, and most of the tools here, they have this option down on the bottom. It says you don't have to select the tools or select the features for them to actually be worked against. So that this allows you to go and sort of drill through whatever features you have, and you're going to make sure everything aligns up to that.
Okay.
If you don't want to do that, you can uncheck that. But
No,
now
I like
they've
that.
been looking.
I like
Yeah,
that tool. So I'm
yeah.
going to try that.
But just be aware, anything you have turned on and selectable, it's going to work against.
Well, I've been using the select tools religiously now, so I know what I got selected.
Okay, yeah. But that's one of the options that almost everything is got now, including if I go in here and start creating lines. One of the things that I like about this is all right, so if I go back here, the extend trim tool, it has this option that says, oh, you don't have to select these things to be able to extend and trim them. So I can go in here, and as I'm just moving over, it's sort of like the align edge, and that it's using map topology to figure out where everything is. Now I don't have to have map topology on here. It'll still work, but it's similar to that where, again, I don't have anything selected right now, and I can have this rat's nest full of lines in here, and I can say, take and extend this, and as I move over here, you'll see a solid line is going to extend it out. Okay, so extend that out, and then I can go over here and I can say trim this one down, and extend that one over there, and extend this over here. So I can go and do an extend trim without actually having to go through and select and then unselect and then select and then unselect and everything. It has that capability in there. Matter of fact, I did want to mention, and I don't know whether my team, because we've been struggling with something in 2.5, in that it doesn't often snap. Some of the newer tools allow us to automatically snap. And I think 2.6 includes something in there. I haven't fully explored it to figure out, but it was one of those undocumented things that you can go and do. And let me see here. There is again, there's so much hidden in here now that it's tough to go and do. There is yeah, there's some options in here now that as I explore them more, I'll be able to go and share them with you. So much nicer now for editing because they actually have people that are editing, giving them feedback and saying, this is the way it needs to work. But it's always about, well, how do you make it so it's not too complex for somebody that wants to pick up and do this, yet at the same time provide them all these little sort of discoverable things as they're going through. Yeah.
The other one that I use a lot is the edit vertices, and then what's it called? And with topologies on,
okay,
there's like another edges. I use that a lot.
The align edge tool. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Align edge tool is very nice. You do want to make sure that you have some sort of topology, whether it's map topology or some sort of rule-based topology for that. By the way, that align features, all right, that align features works where you don't even need any topology on here for it to go and do this. I can go in here and say, let's do a curve. All right, and let's extend this out to 120 so we get some of these other things in here. I have no topology on here, but because it's actually analyzing it by figuring out what vertices are located within that buffer area, it's kind of a sort of a quasi map topology for me on there. Including, if you noted, it actually got rid of a pseudo node in here, a vertex that was in there before. All right. I like the tools that and the direction in which they're going with these. It is they're trying to take those older concepts and move them, make them a little bit easier to use. The problem is that many of us, most of us, are still struggling trying to discover all these options that are in there. There's just so much in there now, to the point where I still have people coming to me asking me to go and teach ArcMap, and I'm telling them I'm not going to teach you, yesterday's software anymore. This is all we're doing. It's all we're doing is teaching ArcGIS Pro now. That's it. This is the future. Yeah. If you notice the latest release of ArcGIS and ArcMap, there were no new features. There are no new features that are being introduced. It's all bug fixes or some enhanced functionality to make it work with web services.
So you just got to do it. Yeah. That's what I had to do.
Oh yeah.
The only thing I don't know how to do in Pro, is bring my text layers that are in map into Pro so I can use them.
Text layers, you mean like
graphic
layers?
It says to update them.
Oh, your annotation layer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's just a
That's
big,
the only thing I don't do.
Gotcha. Okay. So an annotation layer you can bring in, your old ArcMap annotation layers, all right? And you can view them inside of Pro. But in order to be able to edit them, there is a new data structure inside of the annotation feature class. So in order to be able to go and create or edit or modify any existing annotation, you must upgrade that structure. All right, and so let's tell you the warning here. It takes and upgrades that structure in place, meaning it doesn't create a new annotation feature class. It just modifies the existing structure that you have. All right. But that also means that your older software, ArcMap, no longer understands how to go and read that annotation. So if you upgrade an annotation feature class to work inside of Pro, you can no longer even see it in ArcMap. It won't recognize that structure. So that's one of those points where, okay, if you do this, you're not going back anymore.
So I want to do this, but it's in SDE. Can I do it?
That's fine.
Okay.
SDE can store that structure fine, but ArcMap can't read it anymore. ArcGIS Online can, ArcMap cannot.
Imported it to your database first, what I did.
Yeah, yeah. And Tori was just saying she went and took it and imported it into a new file geodatabase just as a precaution and upgraded it there. But the actual command to go and do this, if I go over to my geoprocessing tools, the actual command is just upgrade data set. All right. And it will then ask you to point at the feature class for this. So it can be either a mosaic data set, it can be a annotation feature class. It's just sort of when you're upgrading from an older utility network, a parcel fabric, when you're moving from 2.4 to 2.5 to 2.6, they have different structures in there. You can just you click this upgrade data set and you point at that and it goes and updates the structure of that data set to do it. But again, you just want to remember that with annotation is once you move into the future, you can't go back to the past. That is the major caveat with Anno. All right. Yeah, it just on there. By the way, I absolutely love this, the fact that you can just, I don't know, I want to do something with Kogo. What can I do? There it is. It allows me to go and do that. If I've got a, you know, I remember it used to be called append. So it gives you the ability to go and search for the tools, the ability to go and have history on here and show you everything as far as geoprocessing tools that you did on here. You know, if I'm going in here and I'm doing something like this, I can actually on run, I can actually go and schedule something and say, hey, take this command, this model builder model, and run it at a certain time. So many nice things are built in now. So many nice things. All right. Anything else? Any other questions? Any other comments that we've got on this? What we can sort of do on here. Again, there's a lot of things that now that we've got the basics of topology, how to go and create topology. Don't forget, if you've got 2 feature classes, you got to add them both to your rule. You can't just add the first one. So, and then how to go and validate it. How to go, you can validate just the current extent. You can do, you know, the entire thing. You can do a filter to show you all the rules or just certain rules, or you can show exceptions or not. You can go back and forth on this. You can find just your selected if you have multiples on here. If you go to fix, it will show you what the possible fixes are on those. There's a lot of nice little things in here. The thing that is a little, I'm not crazy about is that zoom when you go to do a merge. I like it, but there are times when it's a little too much. I'd like to be able to go and turn that off somehow. Anything else in here? Any other questions in here? Is there anything, Chris?
Nothing in the chat.
All right, so if no other questions, I'm going to go and turn off the recording, and we'll just open up office hours for a little bit. As long as anybody wants to stick around and talk, we'll do that. And hopefully we'll see you all next week, next Thursday, which is an ArcMap parcel fabric, or excuse me, ArcGIS parcel fabric. We're going to go over initially, we're going to go over some of the changes in 2.6. I've shown you some of them here, but there's others in here that are very worthwhile. And then we'll go and sort of show you how to go and fix densified curves in your fabric if you've migrated some densified curves over. Chris is getting to be really good at that now. So, all right, we got one more. So, okay, any other questions? Not, I will stop the recording.
Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.